This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
Oh, very good morning indeed to you. It's 3 minutes after 10 and you have made possibly the best decision you'll make all day. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I tell you something that just struck me there, only in the news bulletin actually, and it means that we can begin going down a slightly different path from the B word, which is obviously back in the news with a vengeance at the moment. The fact that Priti Patel is shadow foreign secretary. I mean, where do you want to start with the levels of shock that are going on here? The first is, I think I heard her call somebody else smug this morning. That's a moment of magic. That's like an eclipse, right? That's like a solar eclipse. What is the ultimate? What's an irony? If Priti Patel can call somebody else smug, where does that leave the rest of us? Do we need a new word to describe her? I do not know. But of course, she's also been asked for her opinions on the situation in the Middle East, on Israel's continuing slaughter of Palestinian people. And nobody has mentioned, and again, I don't know whether or not this is a criticism or whether or not it's just a reflection of the world that we've built since Brexit. Nobody mentions that she actually got fired from a Conservative government for having secret meetings with Israeli officials. So there's a really trustworthy, objective, unbiased person you can turn to answer questions about what's going on in Israel. Someone fired from the British government for breaking the ministerial code and having secret meetings with members of the Israeli government. I mean, who wouldn't trust her? Who wouldn't make her a dame? Who wouldn't put her back in the shadow cabinet? Do you see what I mean about the scale of what is broken? People like that, it'd be a bit of an exaggeration to say they should be in jail, but they should have been in a form of political purdah for the rest of their lives. So many of them, actually. Frost, do you remember David Frost? He's back in the comment pages of the Telegraph today complaining that the Labour government haven't done enough to undo all of the mess that he made with his original treaty, with his original deal, as they called it, dancing around the room for weeks on end before hours, minutes, seconds on end before the reality of what they'd actually signed up for began to settle. We should do a sort of rogues gallery. I thought I'd done this in the context of my last book, but all of the people who haven't just sold the country down the river, but who have also been rewarded for it in ways that they really care about and value. Did Rees-Mogg get a knighthood? He must have got a knighthood, mustn't he? He must have got a knighthood. Rees-Mogg probably got a knighthood. Hanan's in the House of Lords. Priti Patel's a dame. Andrea Leadsome's a dame. The list is almost endless. Frost got put in the House of Lords. It is unconscionable that these people have been rewarded for their idiocy, incompetency, and I think in terms of patriotism at least, in terms of the national interest, treachery. And what's happened today is fascinating. And I mean that. I just need to acknowledge something before we continue. I am in danger today of becoming a turkey in favour of Christmas. I want to make that absolutely clear. I enjoy nothing more. Although yesterday's show started off a little bit soft, didn't it? A little bit, dazed almost. I have enjoyed nothing more over the last few years than explaining to you the reality that was being either completely ignored or completely misunderstood by almost every other corner of the UK media, including, of course, many beloved colleagues on this very radio station, some of whom were reduced to calling for you to stop talking about Brexit, which is a demonstration of ignorance on a scale that is visible from space for reasons that became crystal clear yesterday. It ain't over. It's never going to be over. But Keir Starmer has taken a punt on the febrile atmosphere that is so easily conjured up by Brexit being over. And I'd quite like him to be right, which makes me a turkey in favour of Christmas. I've shared with you, I think, recently, the phrase that has become something of a refrain for me in recent years when people ask me about the news or people ask me how I deal with all the horrors unfolding at home and abroad. And I point out it's very good for business, but very bad for the soul. Beginning probably with Brexit, actually, or beginning with the coalition government. Very good for business, very bad for the soul. There's lots to talk about. There's lots to get angry about. There's lots to unpick and explain. There's lots of opportunities for us to actually dedicate ourselves to evidence and facts and expertise, while the age seems to be dedicated to promoting idiots and falsehoods and disinformation. But it's been very good for business. Yesterday was strange part of me hopes that yesterday was the last time that we have a show like that. I think I've been here before. Didn't we do a highlights at some point? Didn't we actually go back over some of the greatest calls? I think we did it to mark an anniversary. Someone should keep a record of all this stuff for posterity, Keith. We go back over, it must have been an anniversary. And we went back over some of the deals. We should play back the comments and the speeches made by all the people that have been ennobled and promoted for their involvement in and loyalty to the massive lie. And of course, in Boris Johnson's case, the massive arsonist. We should be more cognizant of the catalogue of calumny and incompetence that we have not just endured in this country, but that we have been groomed and gaslit into actually promoting. And Keir Starmer has not bet the house, but he has expressed a fairly serious hope that things might be over, things might be changing. It's interesting for a whole bunch of reasons, not least because yesterday was the very first time that a UK government acknowledged the damage that has been done. This bizarre charade, this conspiracy of complicity that is part of Keir Starmer's Ming Vase mission, getting the Ming Vase across the ice rink. But of course, for people on the other side of the argument, it was an epic exercise in dishonesty and disingenuousness, pretending that things hadn't gone badly. Yesterday was the first time that a British government acknowledged that Brexit has damaged Britain. The figures are pretty stark in terms of what we have exported from these islands to the European Union. You're down by 21%. That's a fifth. I don't know what you do for a living. Imagine if I came along and removed a fifth of your business or a fifth of your turnover right now. Just gone. Bang. 21%. It's gone. You'd be okay, I hope, but wouldn't be as good as you were yesterday. In imports, as in what we're bringing into this country, there's been a 7% drop, which makes life a lot harder for retailers and wholesalers, and also, of course, means that prices are likely to go up by a little bit. The hit to GDP, the overall hit to GDP, as estimated by the Office of Budget Responsibility, is I think £5 billion a year. And no one has ever talked about this. I kind of understand why. And it's a little bit untrue to say nobody has ever talked about this, but just think what that would do. Just think that the money that would have been coming in if it hadn't been for these huge hits to imports and to exports and to other areas of commercial activity. 4%, forgive me, Britain's GDP today would be 4% higher. If you want to crunch the numbers, every percentage point of those four is worth £25.6 billion. £25.6 billion times four. And yet they're still trying to make you think that all we should really be caring about is fishing folk whose situation today is identical to what it was last week, and whose situation last week was better than it was when we were in the European Union, and whose situation tomorrow, or when this deal finally gets inked, will be immeasurably better than it was yesterday, because they will now be able to sell what they catch to people who actually want what they catch, which in the case of most of the fish that is trawled from English waters is not the English, is not the British. The British don't want it, the fish that we catch. That was always the fundamental anomaly at the heart of the fishing conversation. So it's a funny one, right? Keir Starmer hopes things are over. Keir Starmer hopes the arguments are over. And various people responsible for this catastrophe seem to be dedicated to trying to keep the flames burning. It took me a minute to work that out. Do you know what it is? It's shame. Shame is such a massive driver of the human condition. And I know what I'm talking about because I was raised a Catholic, and Catholicism and guilt go together like a horse and carriage, like love and marriage. That shame is such a huge driver. Shame and projection. I heard some of Priti Patel's interviews as she toured studios this morning. I read some of Boris Johnson's extraordinary, what even would the word be? He returned to Daniel Hannan's imagery of gimp suits and ball gags. This is the United Kingdom. This is the land of Churchill and William Blake. You have a former Prime Minister and a man he put in the House of Lords bringing the imagery of sadomasochistic sex parties to their attempt to analyse our political situation. Listen, I'm all for a giggle, and I would never indulge in kink shaming, but what the fudge has happened to us? That a former Prime Minister, and he's not even the stupidest, Liz Truss, no doubt, is somewhere claiming that this is all some dismal betrayal of the thing that she was opposed to in the first place, but then suddenly was in favour of, and then got, monstered by a lettuce. But there it is. That bizarre notion that we've been so reduced as a country, our body politic, which is us, not the politicians, has been so abused and so poorly served that you've got a shadow foreign secretary opining upon the conduct of a government that she had secret meetings with in direct contravention of her own government's ministerial code. You've got a former prime minister and a half-wit he put in the House of Lords pontificating or deploying the imagery of sadomasochistic sex parties to describe Keir Starmer's largely successful attempts to undo the damage that they have done to our country. And you've got half of Fleet Street queuing up to tell unconscionable lies about what has actually been done. In no particular order. What do you think Asda, Morrison's, Marks and Spencer's, Octopus Energy, Salmon Scotland, BAE Systems, Vodafone, Dairy UK, the British Retail Consortium, Ryanair, Guide Dogs Campaigns, the Federation of Small Businesses, Confederation of British Industry, UK Hospitality, the Food and Drink Federation, the British Poultry Council, Babcock International Group, British Meat Processors Association and the British Chamber of Commerce have got in common? Just off the top of your head, what do you think they've got in common? Yeah, they're all positive. They've all got warm words to say about what was announced yesterday. On the other side, it's not unhinged headlines today. It's unhinged England. It's unhinged Britain. Kiss goodbye to Brexit, write the Daily Telegraph on their front page. Starmer's surrender, writes the Daily Mail. These newspapers still edited by men who have been catastrophically wrong about everything. As ever, the I paper manages to plough a reasonable furrow. Britain wins food and defence deals after fishing climb down with future clash on visas for under 30s. Because the people who claimed that they were perfectly comfortable with people coming here to work, it was just all the other ones they didn't like, are now perfectly uncomfortable with people coming here to work. The Daily Express, once again, is an exercise in imbecility. Keir's abject surrender is betrayal of Brexit Britain. They quote Nigel Farage on the front page, who is, I think, accepted from my analysis of shame, because, like Boris Johnson, I'm not sure he's capable of it. But here they go. The inability to admit a mistake creates a psychological circumstance in which you feel great anger, you feel great upset, but you can't direct it at the cause of your anger, because the cause of your anger is you. It's anger born of shame. Shame that you were involved in something so fundamentally damaging to the very fabric of our nation. Shame that you have essentially nurtured hatreds and divisions that will continue to bedevil this country for years, decades to come. Shame that all the things you told people would come to pass have not come to pass. And the real shame, because I don't buy the conspiracy theories about really rich tax avoiders and the rest of it, it's much, much simpler than that. The real shame comes from the knowledge that you didn't put the effort into understanding any of the things that you've built your career on. You didn't put any effort at all into simply understanding things like the Dublin Agreement or regulatory alignment in Northern Ireland, or the Good Friday Agreement, or the power of trade. Do you remember Dominic Raab admitting he'd never clocked how much trade goes on between Calais and Dover? So you've bought this chocolate box. That's not quite the right image. You've bought this weird fetishized image of the United Kingdom. That poor fella yesterday wants to go back to the 1950s. You bought this mad image. It's interesting how many key Brexiters were brought up abroad in the kind of post-empire miasma. And they had this mad idea that we could do this and we could do that. And because the feelings were so intense, because the emotional heft of Rule Britannia, Britannia rule the waves, lifted you so high that looking down to actually focus on facts and work out what was going on felt Wrong. Unnecessary. It's the shame of knowing that you got on this horse because you hadn't done any due diligence. You hadn't made any effort to understand. Somebody popped up and said, oh, I think you might be wrong about this. What did you do? You shouted, Project Fear! Project Fear! Sit down! Project Fear, Brussels! You didn't do anything. They made no effort. The editor of the Telegraph, the editor of the Mail, the editor of the Sun, the editor of the Express, all of them, and now the editor of the Times, formerly an editor of the Telegraph and formerly an editor of the Sun. The same bloke. That's how Rupert Murdoch's empire works. That's how Brexit Britain works. Didn't do any due diligence. Made no effort at all to understand the most simple of concepts, because whatever you want to call it, bigotry, jingoism, xenophobia, racism, post-imperial idealization, whatever you want to call it, and you can choose the most generous phrase you please, whatever you want to call it, it somehow allowed you to turn off your brain. I don't have to think about this stuff because I'm English. I don't have to think about this stuff because we need them more than they need us more than we need them. I don't have to think about this stuff because the morning after Brexit, the Germans will be queuing up to do bit. I don't have to think about this stuff because Britannia rules the waves. I don't have to think about this stuff because 2 world wars and 1 World Cup. I don't have to think about this stuff because I'm an Englishman and someone who is born English has won the lottery. I don't have to think about any of this stuff because I'm just right. I know I'm right. We're exceptional. We're extraordinary. We're English. And I say English advisedly. There's a little bit of this in the Brits, but it's mostly English, right? I'm the hard man of Brexit, Stephen Baker. I don't need to worry about understanding things. I'm Dominic Raab. I don't need to know about trade between Calais and Dover when I become Brexit Secretary. I'm Priti Patel. I'm a genius, and everyone else is smug. The refusal, the failure to just do your homework, to just have a cursory understanding of what was actually going on, is a source of such unbelievable shame for these people. You can sometimes see it in their eyes when they appear on television. And of course, the big cheeses don't. They send out their little patsies, their little lick spittles to do the studio tours. The big cheeses you'll never see. You'll never see Viscount Rothermere or Paul Dacre or Ted Verity, the Holy Trinity at the Daily Mail. You'll never see Tony Gallagher from the Times. You'll never see whoever edits the Telegraph this week. You'll never see the editor of the Sun. Oh, you might occasionally. She'll go on the BBC to get her toes tickled by Laura Koonsberg. But you won't ever see these people actually taking account or taking responsibility for what they've done to this country. They'll send out well-paid patsies to do that for them. And sometimes you see the shame. You see the shame that it's not so much that they were wrong, it's that they were wrong because of who they are and what they did. They were wrong because of their arrogant belief that they didn't need to do the hard yards, they didn't need to do the digging, they didn't need to do the detail, they didn't need to do the work. The patron saint, probably David Frost, because he actually ended up writing the deal, or negotiating it, despite a year previously being the representative of the Scotch Whisky Association who was passionately opposed to Brexit. So the lies, the failure to study, the producers looking at me because this monologue is now moving into record-breaking territory, but most of all, the shame of it. And that's why they're so angry. And that's why they're so unhinged. And that is why they're still so dangerous.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 23 after 10, and of course the public equivalent of the people who sold this mess to the country are the people who think that the strength of their opinions is somehow a substitute for the foundations of knowledge that inform the opinions. I've got very, very strong opinions, but I can't explain any of them. I'm sick and tired of the European Union making laws that we don't like and have to obey in this country, but I can't name any of them. I'm delighted with the freedoms that we've secured as a consequence of Brexit, but I can't actually name any of them. In fact, the biggest freedom of all, I celebrate the abolition of. But while I celebrate the abolition of freedom of movement, I am a huge fan of freedom. Honest, Gov, just please stop asking me questions. I go to sleep. I don't count sheep as I try to drop off at night. I count the benefits of Brexit, but I can't actually tell you what any of them are. The shame you must carry if you've sold it. Yesterday we examined the question of whether or not we should start apportioning a little bit more blame and shame to the people that bought it and still cling to the carcass. Sovereignty. Oh, I did it for the sovereignty, but I can't tell you what that is either. I did it for the freedoms, but I can't tell you what they are. I did it because of the laws, but I can't name a single one. I did it because of the benefits, but so far there aren't any. And along comes Keir Starmer, an imperfect politician, if ever there was one, and attempts to undo some of the ridiculous damage, unnecessary damage, hideous damage that's been done to us. And they're queuing up to attack him. So what's the question? Are we going to have a phone in today, or shall I just take it all the way through to the 12:30 speech in the House of Commons from the Prime Minister? Oh, all right then, if you insist, we'll have a phone in. But hey, I'm ready. I'm good to go. I don't know, is the short answer. Keir Starmer is hoping that this will calm the waters. This will quell the flames. This will pour oil on the waters. The people most determined to keep those flames burning are the original arsonists. That's why I read you the front pages today. It's why I point out the curious sadomasochistic sex party imagery of Boris Johnson and Daniel Hannan. They are desperate to keep this burning. Farage using the word betrayal on the Daily Express, which is a bit like seeing the word, I don't know, chips on a sign outside a fish and chip shop. Of course they're going to do that. But is it actually going to work this time? I truly don't know. I know that the numbers are against them. I know that most people recognise that it was a stupid thing to do, albeit that not everybody is prepared to take responsibility for their role in it. I know that people who were either not able to vote or not really paying attention and lead the figures of those who want things to get better quickly. Half of Britons say the decision to leave was wrong. People who didn't vote or who were too young think that the decision was wrong. Poll after poll suggests the British public believe the UK is now worse off. Doesn't mean they want to rejoin, and this is something Keir Starmer seems to understand, but it does mean that they recognise the ridiculousness of what was done. So is it going to happen again? Is it going to become, again, the issue that dwarfs all others? Is it going to become the source of division, the source of anger? Are we going to once again promote ignorance and incompetence to such a degree that it takes half of the country with it? They're going to try. That's not what today's question is. They are going to try. Of course they are. And after the news, we'll have a look in Idiot's Corner and we'll find some of the people on whom it's already working. But it's not the power it used to be. But the massed ranks of Fleet Street, the massed ranks of the Fourth Estate are desperate. The only way they can avoid responsibility for what they've done is to attack the people trying to fix it. The only way you can avoid responsibility for having done something wrong is to continue to deny that you've done anything wrong. So the minute someone comes along and says, we're going to have to fix this thing you've done, you are on the hook, right? You are incapable of claiming that you've done nothing wrong unless you attack them. So rather than saying, oh no, we definitely wanted a 21% drop in exports and a 7% drop in imports, you say the man who's trying to make things better is, I can't believe it, is wearing a gimp suit and a ball gag. That's how desperate you are. Imagine how desperate you have to be to abandon anything that's numbers-based, statistical, anything that's remotely related to reality or observable facts, and go instead for the imagery of sadomasochistic sex parties. There you go, point at something substantive, point at something real. No, I've got nothing real. I'm just going to try and portray Keir Starmer. Well, I can't even say it again. It's so ridiculous. So here's the question. Is it going to work again? Do you think Keir Starmer's hopes that the fires of Brexit may be dimmed and possibly even extinguished with his softly approach? Or do you think that the liars, the spivs, the charlatans, the racists and the architects of arson will succeed in turning this country once again into a crucible of ignorance and hatred? 0345 6060 973. Starmer reckons his course will lead us to calmer waters. I hope so, even though it turns me into a turkey praying for Christmas. I don't know. I truly don't know. What's your Uncle Bob doing this morning? Is he mainlining the Daily Express? Is he all over Twitter sucking up the lies of the people whose lies he believed last time? Or do you think we might see a dialing down? I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'm happy to continue this analysis of the British political system until at least 12:30 this afternoon. But there are now other people waiting to contribute to the programme, which I consider to be something of an impertinence, not to mention an inconvenience. But given that it is technically a phone-in, I will start talking to other people shortly. The question we are addressing is this. Is it going to calm down a bit now? Or are the liars going to succeed in reigniting the flames of ignorant fury? 0345 6060 973. Here's Thomas Watts with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
33 is the time. The reset is in place. The newspapers and some of their fellow travellers in broadcast media and politics are going predictably deranged. The reality is largely positive, but since when did reality matter to conversations about the United Kingdom and the European Union? So will the desperate attempts of the Arsonists to reignite their fires of ignorant fury succeed? Or will Keir Starmer's hope that the country is ready to move on prevail? Richard Littlejohn and Andrew Neil, the sort of Scylla and Charybdis of epic wrongness on the front page of the Daily Mail today. A dying organ, but still a influential one. Done up like a kipper, doesn't even begin to cover the PM's sellout, writes one of them, and the rush to throw in our lot with the stagnant EU is unfathomable, writes the scrupulously impartial Andrew Neil, who, of course, unlike Gary Lineker, was allowed to work for the BBC while publishing a magazine which routinely indulged in the most vile sorts of hatred, up to and including praise for the Waffen SS. But hey-ho, one rule for them, eh? Toby's in Bristol. What do you reckon, Toby?
I think we're in great danger of seeing what's happened in the United States being repeated here, which is where you've had an incompetent Trump being replaced by Biden, who is largely seen as competent, fair, and generally, all right, being completely taken to pieces by their media and by Trump himself, which allowed Trump to get back in, and it's where we are now. And we're sort of seeing that. I'm worried that we'll see that similar sort of attempt by the press, by the media, to try and manoeuvre public opinion. So when the next election rolls around, we get back in a bunch of, as you put it, incompetents and shysters.
I don't know that the parallels are complete between the UK and the US. I mean, oddly, their media was not as... I mean, the reason why Fox News has never taken off in this country was because we already had the Daily Mail and the Sun. There was no space to the right of Genghis Khan into which a new broadcasting operation could move. So, I mean, they failed massively, the New York Times, the Washington Post. I saw some journalists I respect yesterday going in with a question about whether or not fishing had been thrown under the bus, without mentioning that the fishing industry employs roughly the same number of people in this country as the tattoo industry. And the last time I checked, they'd sold half of their own quotas to foreign vessels anyway. So it was always a massive red herring. The media didn't mess it up for Biden. They bought into false equivalence and started talking about him in a way that caused him enormous problems. I don't know. I want you to be wrong. That's why I'm waffling. I want you to be wrong, but I can't come up with a big reason why you are.
It's not a perfect analogy.
No.
But I do think there is this desire to basically enable Starmer to fail, because, as you said, he's imperfect. I get that. I voted Labour. I want to return. I would return tomorrow, and I know it's not going to happen. But I largely see this, as you've already very fairly pointed out, as a sort of trying to undo some of the awfulness that we've been through for the last 5 years specifically. But I do think that the comparison between this desire to undo and pull apart, so that when people are actually standing in the ballot box, there's enough sense of doubt still lingering in their minds, and there's enough fear of what might happen. The
analogy's getting better, because, of course, Biden was very good for the economy, but people marched into the voting booths thinking that he'd been bad for it. And that is a failure of journalism. Even if the journalists weren't complicit in that, they failed to give people the information that they needed.
Yes. That's, I think, is exactly where we are, and that's why this absolute barrage that we're getting. And interestingly enough, I sort of occasionally pick up some of your posts on TikTok.
Oh, yes.
And I would say about 90% of what I'm seeing comment-wise is either auto-generated bots, or just those furious people who really, as you say, a bit like the people who brought us Brexit, don't understand what they're talking about, but just like the sound of their own fury. and can't admit that they actually have done something bad. They just cannot bring themselves to. So that idea that is the conversation starting to shift? Yes, it is. Personally, I would love it to go faster and further, but being a realist in this world, you know that it's going to take an awful lot longer to sort of resolve and allow people to even contemplate the idea of even just joining a customs union, which would be hugely beneficial to us, which even that is too toxic at the moment, which is a staggering admission when you think actually the economic good that potentially could do for us.
And you think back to the king of the shysters, to use your word, Nigel Farage, talking not long ago about how we could get a Norway-style deal. I mean, that's the thing that makes your analysis strong, is that the individuals concerned, and in the case of the media, the institutions, will move on a sixpence as long as they continue to support the nonsense that they've inflicted on the country. They can go from saying, nobody is saying we'll leave the single market, or which I think Hanan said, or Carswell, or one of them. Good Lord, there's so many of them, isn't there? It's like Zulu. And then Farage saying we could have a deal like Norway, and then, a month later, that would be the worst imaginable scenario. It's the power of opposition, and of course they're in opposition again. And when they were in power, they had to put a lid on everything and pretend that whatever it was they managed to secure was good. And now Starmer has secured something that is actually good. They're back in the opposition. Farage has always been in opposition. They're liberated. They can tell whatever lies they want because they're never going to be tested in the crucible of government, in the crucible of power. I don't know. I hope Toby's wrong. And if I were to offer up grounds for optimism, it would be the stuff that's missing from all the front pages today, the stuff about the proportion of the public who know that leaving the EU is a silly thing to do, who know that it has hurt us economically, who might not know the actual numbers. They might not know about the 4% hit to GDP or the 21% drop in exports, but they can sort of feel it. People who've never really seen shelves in shops before that have got photographs on them instead of fresh produce because the supply chains have been affected by that 7% drop in imports. Those are little things that mount up to create a sense that this was all very silly. Let's let them carry on screaming into the ether, but we're not going to fall for it again. I won't get fooled again, as I think The Who once sang. I don't know. I honestly don't know because I didn't get fooled the first time. Patrick is in Fyn in Denmark. Patrick, what do you think?
Good morning, James. How are you?
Very well, mate. What's on your mind?
Before I make my point, the Norway style, which you've just spoken about, the Norway style deal that you just spoke about, I actually had an argument with Mr. Farage on one of the evening shows. Presumably, you still have the tape somewhere where I explained to Mr. Farage... Let's not get carried away, mate.
I can't get a jingle for about a year, so it's unlikely anyone's going to dig that out for you. Go on briefly.
But I had to convince him that Norway would actually had the same freedom of movement as the rest of Europe, and he denied it. And then some way in the call, someone actually said, actually, they have. He said, well, thank you very much for your call, and cut me off. But that still probably exists somewhere in LBC, I don't know.
Mate, there'll be 5,000 examples of that level of dishonesty and arrogance. Yeah. So it's probably somewhere in a massive archive, but I'm not going to be able to find it. Why did you ring in today?
I think that the noise regarding the deal that our Prime Minister is trying to get will die down. A lot of people who voted for it are not around anymore. A lot of people who voted for it now regret voting for it, even if they say they don't. They now see the USA as they are, at the moment, a very unreliable partner with tariffs and trade barriers all over the place. The man in the street must know the truth by now. He's seen the price increase.
Well, you're in Denmark, and maybe the man in your street does, but I don't know whether the man in my street does.
Okay, we haven't split. But the only problem I have is when I try and sell into the UK, you've got a lot more paperwork now.
Yeah.
And I know when they try and sell to us, you've still got the paperwork. And in some cases, if you do a demonstration, you have to produce a carnet, same as the rock and roll people have to do. So, yeah. My other point is, if it actually happens and the under-30s are allowed to spend more time here, it would benefit a lot of people, and a lot of students would see the benefit in that, including my daughter, who's in her 20s, who would like to spend more time with her dad, who can't at the moment because of the 90-day rule.
It's a funny one, isn't it? They're kicking off about that now. I think I saw one character claiming that there could be as many as 80 million young people coming here, which is a lie of such extraordinary... It's the same as the Turkey lie again. So these are the moments where I think, I wonder if it will work again. You know, when you reheat something, it can sometimes be just as delicious as it was the first time around. In the case of heavily spiced food, it can sometimes be even nicer. So they lied about, every single person in Turkey was not only going to become a member of the European Union, they were also going to move here. And because it's a Muslim country, this, of course, spooked all the usual horses. And I saw someone today, I think it was that ludicrous character from The Sun, claiming that 80 million people would be coming as a consequence of youth mobility, which I presume would involve pretty much every single person of the relevant age deciding to up sticks and move to Brexit Britain in a heartbeat, despite the fact that the treaty makes it clear that the limits and caps are to be negotiated and to be agreed. So it feels more ridiculous than the Turkey thing did, but maybe we're seeing and hearing what we want to see and hear. I don't know. How do we tell the difference between optimism and clarity?
Difficult one, because people view things in different ways. For some people, that would be a victory to be able to have freedom of movement for under 30s. Other people see it as returning to the EU. I think it would be very positive because it works in both ways.
But of course it's positive. Of course, freedoms, mobility, these are marks of modernity. Some people, of course, hate modernity. Thank you, Patrick. The time is just coming up to 10:44. It's a question about discourse, which is a bit different for us because we don't generally go in for conversations about conversations. But this is a question about the discourse, and it's about knowing what you know. Even if I'm somebody, or this is a program that over the course of the last 10 years, you've had a very changeable relationship with. You may have, in 2016, thought that I had my head so far up my backside that when I coughed, I whistled. That doesn't quite work, does it? No, that's wrong. But anyway, the point being what you think is going to happen to the discourse. I suppose what I'm trying to say is, did you fall for it the first time? Will you fall for it again? And how much can we extrapolate from your experience? You see someone on the telly claiming that 80 million foreigners are going to move here as a consequence of youth mobility. And do you feel those little, what are they? Those little seeds of stupidity start sprouting again? That's not a very kind way of putting it. Do you feel those ancient hatreds bubbling back to the surface, our sort of tribal island nation sensibilities that responded to Boris Johnson's lies about Turkey so violently? Will they work again? Boris Johnson comes back round and says, "Hello, folks. Gimp mask here. We've got 80 million people. Every teenager, every 25-year-old in Europe is going to come here. And where are you going to go? God, I can't have that. We can't have that, Doris. We can't have every 20-something in Europe moving here. We're too small. We're an island nation. We're small. I just don't. I honestly don't know." That's why contempt for the con and compassion for the con was the focus of yesterday's show, because I got it. I completely got it last time. I completely understood how it worked. I don't know whether I'm being biased, whether I've got confirmation bias of my own here, or whether my optimism is actually born of clarity. I don't see how it could work again. If you bought that box, that shiny box with a toaster on the front, you bought it. Not only did you buy it, you boasted to your neighbours about it. And your neighbours who told you were silly to buy it, you were rude to them. You maybe stopped sending them Christmas cards. You've got your box. You've got your shiny toaster box. And you love it. It's a toaster called Sovereignty. And then you got it home and you opened it. A few weeks later, a few months later, because you just loved stroking the box. You didn't want to open the box, that lovely box, that box of Sovereignty, the Sovereignty toaster. And you opened it, it had a breeze block inside. Are you going to buy another box off the same blokes? I just don't know. Are you going to buy another box off the same blokes? Off Tony Gallagher at the Times, off Victoria Newton at the Sun, off Ted Verity and Paul Dacre at the Daily Mail, off Nigel Farage, off Boris Johnson, off Daniel Hannan, off Priti Patel, off Suella Braverman? Are you going to buy another box off them? 0345 6060 973. Because I don't know. I know I'd find it harder to feel compassion for you, and that's a patronising observation anyway. I'd know it harder to feel empathy, harder to understand why you'd done it, but I don't know whether you're going to do it again. Are you going to buy another box, another shiny box off the con men, spivs and liars that sold you the last one, that you were convinced had a sparkling, glorious future in it and just contained bricks? Is your mum? 0345 6060 973. Is your dad? Is your brother? Is your sister? Are they going to buy it again. No one's a fan of your sarcasm, Carl, who's just congratulated me for having a Boris Johnson impression that's almost as good as my Trump one. It's 10:47.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10 minutes to 11 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's a question I didn't think I'd be asking this early. I thought Starmer's caution in campaigning was pretty clear, although the manifesto did lay out pledges to do exactly what he did yesterday, something that's been conveniently overlooked by much of the UK media. And just a moment, I know I've talked a lot this hour, but it is my specialist subject. If I ever do Celebrity Mastermind again, I'll probably do Brexit, but it'll be a lot harder than the last time I did it because I did a bloke who'd only written 4 books. But I digress. It's not just about how boiled the brains of the right-wing media are. That's a bit of a given. Whether it's somebody claiming that 80 million young people are going to move here or whether it is someone insisting that nobody wants to talk about Brexit anymore. They are running away from responsibility for their own role in crucifying the country they claim to love. I get all of that. But what is worse in a way is the way that it infiltrates all the areas of the media that haven't had their brains boiled. The way that yesterday almost everybody went in, as I predicted would happen on Thursday, when we talked about fishing and why no one had mentioned it for years and why everyone was about to start mentioning it again. They all go on in this question of a betrayal over fishing. A tiny contributor to our GDP, a fraction of businesses that are going to benefit from what was announced yesterday. And of course, fish fleets come out of it better than they went into it. It's the ultimate unicorn. Oh, no. We were going to negotiate a new deal and it was going to be brilliant. Well, why didn't you, lads? Why didn't you? Well, we were going to. Yeah, but you didn't. Yeah, but but you didn't. Doesn't matter. He could have done, but you didn't. It's incredible, right? The contortions that they have to undertake. But what that does is it creates an ecosystem in which even people at the BBC feel they have to go in on a question, or they have to start talking immediately about the people who aren't going to be happy. The British public want to know the facts. The British public want to know the opinions of people with, if you like, skin in the game. So it's correct to report that some fishing people will be unhappy about this, partly because they don't understand elements of what has been agreed because it hasn't been fully published or inked, partly because they were hoping for unicorns. They were hoping for another negotiation that would make the last negotiation null and void and be better than the one that Boris Johnson brought home for them. But to go in on that question or to say half the country's going to feel you've betrayed fishermen is to ignore. And this list keeps getting longer. The supermarkets, some energy companies, Salmon Scotland, that's, I think, to do with the difference between catching fish and farming fish. Weapons industry, communications, Vodafone, Dairy UK, Ryanair, British Retail Consortium, guide dog campaigns, Federation of Small Businesses, the Confederation of British Industry. Who are you going to trust? Back to Michael Gove territory. Who are you going to trust on what's good for British business? The Confederation of British Industry or Andrea Leadsom, who, to be fair, has been gratifyingly quiet on this. And that's the problem, is that I think it's partly because of the accusations of bias that grew up in 2014, 2015, led by the Daily Mail. You couldn't work for the BBC if you had accidentally worn an EU badge to a child's sports day. They'd come down on you. They'd print pictures of your house. It was absolutely extraordinary. So now they all, including people I really like and admire, they all subconsciously start bending before they've even got their first question out of their mouth. A lot of people will think this is a betrayal. A lot of people are going to be unhappy. Don't you feel that the fishing... Why? Why are you going in on the opinions, often ill-founded, of people proven to be wrong? Tell the public, tell the audience, tell the viewers, tell the readers, tell the listeners what they need to be informed. Some will be good, some will be bad. But our job, I thought, my late father taught me, was to give people what they need to be informed. And that feels like a different age and quite possibly a different country. So, will the people, desperate not to be informed, convinced that the strength of their opinion is much more important than the foundations on which it is built, will they prevail again? Will the flames of ignorant fury be successfully reignited by all the people that we've been talking about this morning? Thomas is in Worthing. Thomas, what would you like to say?
Yes, hello, James.
Hello, Thomas.
Yeah, firstly, just want to say how grateful I am for your work. You're
That's
a real
kind.
breath of fresh air.
Thank you, Thomas.
I want to make just two very brief points, sort of linguistic. I'm a philosopher of language. and taught at University of Oxford and London. And I think, framing the discourse is central to this, as you rightly know. I want to just stay 1 second with your metaphor of an arson outbreak. I mean, Brexit was an arson attack. We all know that. Anyone that looks at empirical evidence knows that. And there's a phenomena which I'm going to coin a word for, and then I'm going to send it to you. I haven't done it yet, but you may have heard of this, right? So there are places in the world, in America, in some rundown parts of Britain, and even in parts of France, where there's a fire breaks out. Maybe it's arson, maybe it's an accident, and the fire brigade go in, and then the local people gather around and throw bottles and stones and even shoot the fire brigade. It's a particular thing, a sort of arsonists shooting the fire brigade. I'm going to coin a word for it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we've got here, is Keir Starmer is a moderate, decent, middle-of-the-road kind of guy who's like the fire chief. He's sending in teams to try and fix the fires that have been caused by Brexit. And these right-wing extremists, who are the original arsonists, are now shooting at him. And so that's, just as a metaphor.
Absolutely right. Why are they doing it? Because, I mean, the metaphor falls down slightly, because my theory would be they're doing it because not to do it would be to admit that they started the fire, or even to admit the existence of the fire, which they can't, which isn't quite the role of the arsonist in the actuality, as opposed to in the other side of the metaphor. But so do we know why they're doing it? Just to avoid acknowledging or admitting reality?
Okay, so this is the second part of my thing. I've coined a word, a linguistic explanation. You're right to home in on shame, because that's part of it. They're so ashamed that they've started this fire that they want to shoot the fire brigade to kind of bury the evidence, But I've coined a word which I use as a philosopher, which is Sophiaphobia. Sophiaphobia is a medical condition that is the fear of knowledge, the fear of wisdom.
That's brilliant.
If people suffer from Sophiaphobia, and millions do, sadly, it can happen to institutions. It's a sociological thing. Knowledge is suppressed because it's that, I don't want to know. No, don't tell me that I'll have responsibility.
Good grief.
So I've just finished a commentary. I'm a philosopher of religions. I've just finished a commentary 10 years in the making on the Gospel of Matthew. And, Sophiaphobia is what crucified. I mean, you can see it as the plot line develops in Matthew. You can see it in all the great philosophical and religious texts. So we talk about philosophy, which is the love of wisdom. I have a PhD. I love wisdom. But the counterforce is Sophiaphobia. People hate wisdom, and they kill teachers. It's amazing you haven't been shot yet, James, because you're a wise guy. And
careful, my wife might be listening.
The Sophiaphobes will be coming for you,
Well, I don't think I'm important enough, but
No. Anyway, that's my offer.
I'm not going to let you go. That's brilliant. I've written that down. I've got Sophiaphobia on my list. I'm looking forward to the word that describes the...
I've got a book that I'll send you,
Do. What I want to ask you before you go, though, is something that I picked up again yesterday, and it's very closely linked, I think, to your Sophiaphobia. Right. This attempt to claim that educational opportunities are a middle-class obsession.
Oh, my God.
I find that so depressing. The idea that only middle-class people want their children's horizons to be broadened, or want their children to be educated, or want their children to have freedom of mobility. It's a middle-class thing. That is, for an academic like you, that must be a terrible thing to witness.
Well, I mean, I think the attack on the middle class is unconscionable, to use the word you just used. I find myself using that word more and more now. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the middle class. We made this country great in its, we were the guys that did the inventions that got the ideas from the ivory tower into the technology that ran the railways and all the rest of it, and created the internet. I mean, the middle class in any society are the backbone. The attacks on the middle class come from the elites, the elite toffs that just don't want anybody to be
billionaire
educated.
media owners and the public school educated spivs. Well, the thing that worries me most about it is the message it sends to people about their own children, if they're not middle class, is that you shouldn't be aspiring to higher levels of education. You shouldn't be aspiring to qualification. Matthew wants to know what your book is called, Thomas.
It's called Sophiaphobia.
Oh, that's the actual title.
Google it, Yeah, that's the title
Fantastic.
of the book. Yes,
well, I look forward to getting hold of that. And thank you for both.
Keep up the great work, James.
I shall do my best, albeit that I have your worries ringing in my ears now as much as your compliments. It is, I'm joking, it is 11 o'clock. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Sophia yeah, there we go. It's 11 o'clock.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:04. It's running a company is not the same as running a radio show. I don't mean to sound stupid. Sometimes it just happens. But if I ran a company, there's things I wouldn't have said over the last few years. If I was running a supermarket, for example, I still want you to come to my supermarket. I'm not going to start painting all the problems that my supermarket faces, because that means that when you walk past it, you think, oh, I'm not going in there. They're having a right old time of it. But it is interesting, isn't it, how I presume the others have joined in, but certainly off the top of my head, Asda, Morrison's and Marks and Spencer's have all come out to praise this deal because it will undo bad things that were done to them by the nonsense that Boris Johnson and David Frost inflicted on them. Most obviously, to quote the Asda spokesperson, it will significantly reduce costs and bureaucracy, both for the fresh produce we import from the EU and the goods we move every day to our customers in Northern Ireland. So again, how many people, I wonder, realised that that's what Johnson had done? Realised that that's what Brexit had done. Brexit had significantly increased costs and bureaucracy, both for the fresh produce we import from the EU and the goods we move every day to our customers in Northern Ireland. So when you read about the 21% drop in imports, you forget that's stuff that's getting through more costly and with more red tape. So it didn't disappear because, of course, it didn't disappear. We continued to buy things and we continued to need them to be brought into the country. But there was more red tape to bring them in, and it cost more money to do so for everybody and everything that came in from the EU. Morrison's chief executive has said that sweeping away these trade barriers will remove cost, complexity and delay in food imports from the continent. But they haven't gone in hard. Once the referendum was over, you're probably thinking I'm a right old dingbat, but I hadn't properly clocked this before. In the end, because I sometimes sat here thinking, why aren't they all shouting the odds? Why haven't they all put me on the board? But they can't, because they have to convey confidence to customers, right? Is this right? I mean, this makes sense, right? So now that Keir Starmer has undone the bad stuff, they can praise what he's done, when previously they wouldn't have gone in that hard on the bad stuff because there was nothing they could do about it. If you had Boris Johnson or Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak in Downing Street, what would have been the point of saying, we really need to undo some of the stuff that you keep telling people is good, but we both know actually is really bad? There's no point me doing that as the head of Asda or Morrison's, because it's never going to happen. Rishi Sunak, Liz Truss, Boris Johnson is never going to turn around and say, you know what, you're absolutely right. It was one of the stupidest things any government in the history of humanity has ever done to make food more expensive for its own population. So we're going to do our very, very best to undo that. They couldn't do it. They couldn't admit it. Managing Director of Marks and Spencer's. Today's announcement on trade is a major step forward. An SPS agreement with the EU removes the pointless bureaucracy we face in moving our products across Great Britain, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland. We're really pleased, says the head of Marks and Spencer's, to see this sort of pragmatic and positive move from the government. But here's Billy Bunter from The Sun to tell you lies about youth mobility. It's bizarre, right? These are the men and women who really know what they're talking about. Salmon Scotland, fish farming body, crucially, so distinct from the fishing fleet, described the deal as a slashing of red tape. Do you remember when they were telling you, the people that we've been listening for 2 days now, do you remember when they were telling you that Brexit was going to reduce red tape, that we had to get rid of the red tape that leaving Brexit would? How come Keir Starmer is now reducing red tape, indeed slashing red tape, that in the words of the head of Salmon Scotland would allow Scottish products and people easier access to the EU, which of course they never voted to leave? How come Keir Starmer is slashing red tape that the people who brought you Brexit claimed we'd be getting rid of? They actually said they'd get rid of it and introduced it. Shares in BAE Systems and other, as I suggested yesterday, London-listed defence companies have gone up fairly rapidly. that new security pact as the detail emerges. And on it goes. The British Retail Consortium said that the deal will help keep costs down and create greater security in retail supply chains. Who are you going to trust when it comes to retail in Britain? Are you going to trust the British Retail Consortium, or are you going to trust Richard Littlejohn to tell you that you've been done up like a kipper? You tell me, all right? I don't know whether he lives in this country currently, but he has spent much of his career filing his copy from the United States of America about how awful his home country is. But who are you going to trust? Like, hand on heart. If you're talking about the retail situation in Britain, are we going to trust the British Retail Consortium, or are we going to trust the Daily Mail columnist? If you want to know about small businesses, for example, are you going to listen to the policy chair of the Federation of Small Businesses, who said this agreement marks genuine progress by untangling the rules for small exporters of plant and animal products? If British goods can reach European markets with fewer setbacks, that marks real progress. Are you going to listen to him, senior character at the Federation of Small Businesses, or are you going to listen to Andrew Neil, paid by the Daily Mail to write that the rush to throw in our lot with the stagnant EU is unfathomable? A man who, say what you like about him, he spent much of his career exporting plant and animal products to foreign countries and fully understands that it doesn't matter whether they're on the other side of the world or just on the other side of the... Of course he doesn't know what he's talking about. Doesn't matter. Check, please. Richard Littlejohn. Done up like a kipper doesn't even begin to cover the PM sellout. So who are you going to listen to? The head of the British Retail Consortium about British retail? The Federation of Small Businesses about small businesses? Dairy UK about the situation that the dairy industry is facing? They've welcomed the agreement as well. The chief executive of Dairy UK welcomes the agreement reached this weekend. As our largest and oldest trading partner, unencumbered trade with the EU is incredibly valuable for the dairy and agri-food sector, and the ease in administrative requirements will be very welcome for our members. We're particularly pleased to see a common understanding on sanitary and phytosanitary, that's SPS, by the way, regulations, which is a critical and welcome step forward for dairy trade. But why on earth would you listen to the woman who runs Dairy UK when you've got Andrew Neil telling you that the rush to throw in our lot with the stagnant EU is unfathomable? You want to know about dairy? Listen to Andrew Neil. Don't listen to Dairy UK. You want to know about British retail? Listen to Richard Littlejohn. Don't listen to British Retail Consortium. You want to know about small businesses? Listen to Nigel Farage. Don't listen to the Federation of Small Businesses. You want to know about food supply? You want to know about supermarkets? Don't listen to Asda, Morrison's, M&S and the rest of them. Listen to Daniel Hannan or Boris Johnson or Priti Flipping Patel. Why on earth would you listen to the people whose livelihoods this is, whose jobs is to support and uphold the livelihoods of every single person working in these sectors? Why would you listen to them when you could invite Priti Patel onto your programme? Why on earth would you pay any attention to them when you could just read out Richard Littlejohn's column in the Daily Mail and pretend that it's your own thoughts? Why on earth, if you want to know about what's going to happen to any of these sectors, would you listen to the people that are actually in them and run them when you could listen to some blowhard who's been proven wrong about everything but still insists upon patting himself on the back for being a blooming genius? And they are the ones, of course, reduced to attacking the man attempting to rebuild the buildings that they burned down. It's extraordinary. And the more I think about it, although callers have not exactly been in full agreement with me, the more I think that actually things might be changing. 11:13 is the time. Ben's in Skegness. Ben, what do you reckon?
Hi, James. How you doing?
Very well, mate.
Good. I just want to say I think you're completely wrong, mate. I think, you're going in on Johnson and Patel and everyone you mentioned. It's not their fault. It's not their fault at all that, we had our toaster replaced with a breeze block. It's Labour. It's always been Labour. They started as Remain, and then they started trying to bring down, they tried to make the Brexit deal worse for us because Labour are anti-EU. I can't keep it on it anymore, but that's what people...
You had me. You had me for a minute. You did. Because I get...
That's what people in my area think, James.
Well, I'm not going to lie to you. I thought I'm going to struggle with this one because I've not heard such unmitigated mince in a long time, and I do this for a living.
I hear it all the time, James,
I know you do. I see it on social media. I see it in Idiot's Corner. I get my messages coming in. I don't think people in real life ring me anymore with the position that Brexit could have gone brilliantly if it wasn't for the Labour Party, right?
I think for your mental health, mate, that's a good idea.
It's a bit late for that. But that's the nutshell. It could all have gone brilliantly if it wasn't for those pesky kids from Labour.
Well, this is it, and now the same people are saying, "Well, Labour's at it again. They're trying to bring us closer to the EU. They're trying to reverse Brexit. They're trying to, they're trying to go against the will of the people." And that's the opinion that's held down here. And I think at least here,
is that a baby? Is that a baby that you've got with you there, or is it an unspecified mammal?
It's my little boy. He's 9.5 months old.
Beautiful sound. One of the most beautiful sounds in the world, isn't it?
I know.
That's completely done me now. Even if you'd been telling the truth. Oh, there he goes. Yeah, that's what you need to do if you want to ring in holding Ben's position sincerely, is just have a little baby with you, and it will melt my heart so much that I won't... Oh, he's off again. I won't be able to give you the kicking that you so richly deserve. Oh, that was lovely. Do you try and discuss things with these people? Do you ask them, hang on, if the deal was ruined by Labour, why are you cross that they're undoing it, for example? Might be one question you could ask.
Because they believe the lies that are being spread again. They believe the 80 million people lie, and it's just they don't want to listen to facts and logic. They just want to believe what they want to believe.
And that is the problem. So fear-phobia, almost, which
I've been racking my brain for years trying to figure out what causes it. And I think this morning you sort of hit the nail on the head, and it's shame and it's embarrassment.
It has to be.
I think they can't admit they were lied to, and they can't admit they were wrong. They've got to double down and hope it works out this time.
And who else are you going to blame for the fact that this unachievable dream hasn't been achieved? You're not going to blame yourself for dreaming. You're going to blame people for frustrating it, aren't you? You have
exactly.
to. Do you think it will work? I know it's going to work because the constituency you described, both literally in Skegness and nationally, more broadly, obviously exist, and they're not going anywhere. You could call them Farage's base, I suppose. But do you think that they're going to be big enough that enough people will join in with the reigniting of the flames to turn the country back into a Brexit-obsessed bin fire?
I can only hope not. I mean, my own family part of that base, and that's the problem I face every day. Is we try and keep politics out of the conversation because I'm the only one that believes what I believe. But
well, you're the only one that relies on facts and evidence to form your opinions and your beliefs, as opposed to some of the characters that we've been talking about today and the lies that they've been spouting in some cases for decades. David's got headphones on, and the baby apparently sounds even more charming with the benefit of headphones. And I have to tell you, Ben, before you go, you got everyone. There are people who are turning the radio up. People were messaging Keith to tell him to prepare the fade out. I mean, you got absolutely everyone with that opening. 17 minutes after 11 is the time, and it's both funny and not funny because the country is full of people who will be swallowing the line being fed to them today by the Daily Mail and the Daily Telegraph and the Daily Express and the Sun, that you can somehow blame Labour for committing the cardinal sin of trying to fix some of the hellish damage inflicted upon all of us by their champions. Remember, the Daily Mail thought Liz Truss was the answer to the country's prayers. The Daily Telegraph couldn't contain their excitement when Liz Truss announced her budget that brought the country to the precipice of existential catastrophe. Same people writing these articles, the same people that told you Liz Truss was a genius, that Boris Johnson was brilliant, the same broadcasters who tickled their toes, queuing up now to tell you that Keir Starmer's got this wrong. And that's why I've got some optimism that eventually the dam has to break. Eventually you have to say, I won't get fooled again.
James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 11 is the time. There's a lad I used to work with many, many moons ago who is, I find, one of my favourite contributors to Blue Sky, which is the social media platform, the only social media platform I'm on these days. And he's called Gabriel Milland, and he's written, for Brexit to have been betrayed, in quotes, for normal people, those same normal people will need to have perceived some benefits from it. This is what I think Ben picked up on. Normal people it's an unfortunate phrase because it renders everybody not in that category abnormal. But normal people voted for Brexit, right? And if those normal people are going to be successfully persuaded that Brexit has been betrayed, they would have to have perceived some benefits from it. And as Gabriel writes, many of them don't really. Most of them don't really. And for anyone bitterly opposed to immigration, if that was your guiding light for Brexit, then the post-pandemic surge probably feels like a far greater betrayal than anything that Keir Starmer did yesterday. This is the cleverest analysis I've seen so far of why I'm asking the question that I'm asking today. And he's not responding to my programme, I don't think. Just that idea of, is it going to work again? It's where my brain went this morning, and it seems to be where his has gone as well, because he also points out that the Leave vote wasn't just about immigration. It was also about an economy that failed to increase living standards, which it's still doing. So how can that be a betrayal? And then, of course, the national sovereignty. And at this point, he uses a phrase that suggests perhaps he does listen to the programme occasionally. Well, that hasn't buttered many parsnips. So the Leave voters he and I are most interested in, for them, I suspect, writes Gabriel Milland, that Brexit increasingly falls into the category of something which seemed like a good idea at the time, but which no one really wants to talk about anymore. Which is fine if you're a member of the public. Obviously, if you're a member of the media and you encourage people to vote for it, and then you have the brass neck to say, oh, I don't want to talk about it anymore, everyone's moved on, we should stop talking about it, then you've got rather more serious questions to answer. But for an ordinary voter let down by the media, it seems perfectly reasonable not to want to talk about it anymore. And he goes on, that's not to confuse disillusionment with rejoiner fervour. That's why Starmer is not talking about rejoining, but he is recognising that people are disillusioned. But here it is. Here is his point in this brilliant thread. The Brexit battle standard is not something that a lot of Leave voters feel like rallying to. And that, in a way, is a more poetic way of putting the question that I've asked you this morning. Do you think that they are, you are, going to rally once again to the Brexit battle standard? Because there's some data from January that shows even when you break it down by sector, hardly anybody thinks that Brexit has been good for anything. So you go through control over laws, ability to respond to COVID, British politics, level of international trade the UK does, British businesses, the UK's diplomatic influence across the wider world, national security, UK economy, yourself personally, UK public finances, strength of the union, NHS, tourism from Europe to the UK, diplomatic influence in Europe, immigration levels, tourism for Britons travelling to Europe, cost of living, crime, every single sector. There's not a single person in any of a single one of those sectors where people thinking that Brexit has had a very positive impact gets into double figures. I'll say that again. People thinking Brexit had a very positive impact doesn't get into double figures in any of the sectors that I have just listed. And it only gets into double figures for 1, 2, 3 of them. And I mean, respectfully, they're wrong. The control that the UK has over its own borders, 25 plus 6 for very positive or fairly positive impact, so still nowhere near half. 23 on the ability to respond to the pandemic, which is probably born of the loudly trumpeted claims about vaccines somehow being secured here quicker as a consequence of not being in the EU, which was not true. But of course, by the time it was over, we'd been caught up by everybody. But you can see why that is a persuasive thing. But there you go. It doesn't get into double figures in any but 3 categories. No, I've lied to you. It doesn't get into double figures in any categories. Oh, yes, it does. They're British politics on 10, but everything else is in single figures. And so who's going to rally to the standard? Ben thinks half of Skegness is. Imagine if they actually raised a flag on Turnham Green or on Clapham Common or on Ilkley Moor. Or raised a flag and said, rally to the flag! That ridiculous man claimed he'd put on khaki, didn't he, if Brexit wasn't properly delivered? But of course he also promised that he'd leave the country if it failed, so perhaps we shouldn't take him seriously on anything. But would they rally? I don't know that they would. That's the best answer to my question that I've seen so far. Murray's in Hertford. Murray, what do you think?
I think your previous... Oh, thanks a lot, James, for having me on, by the way.
You're very welcome.
It's just things like Groundhog Day in some degrees, and there is a morbid fascination in listening to people still trying to support Brexit. But anyway, the thing I was going to say was I think the reason why this we won't get fooled again, to quote the lyrics, is the fact that there's been that buyer's remorse. It's been like the people who bought those tickets for those god-awful Christmas fairs and you turn up, or it's a theme park.
Yes.
You open the door and there's nothing there. Now, that works on two levels for me as to why I don't think, why it will work again. Directly, people have seen that the nonsense they were told that wouldn't happen 9 years ago has happened. So I just jotted some of these things down. Really simple things that make a massive difference for people's life. Mobile roaming, okay?
Yeah.
Pets travel. Just moving around, taking your beloved pets. Using an e-gate, not getting off the plane, walking to arrivals and thinking, oh my God, look at the queue. Dover Port, every summer and bank holiday and school holiday. Lorries on the A23, whatever the road is down there, Operation Stack. These are tangible things that people have seen that no one said would happen. In fact, the opposite. David Davis said, wasn't it?
Yeah, none of it will happen.
Knocking on our doors to arrange a deal. The Italians will be selling Prosecco. The Germans will be selling Mercedes. So on one tangible level, people have seen it was nonsense. And people have seen the negative effects of what they were promised wouldn't happen. They've opened the door into that theme park, and there's a man dressed as Harry Potter who's 65 years old with a beard
and a pipe. But the
pipe.
But you heard Ben. Ben opened up very cleverly, defending a position that he doesn't hold himself, but which plenty of people do. The reason why I haven't got my unicorn, Murray, the reason why I haven't got my promised land is the fault of all the people that frustrated it. That's the second line of the story. And do you think that one might still hold?
No, because you've got to... This is another thing. I was going to ring in yesterday and speak to you about something. I think we have to come to terms with the fact that it's not quite like MAGA, because there's some very interesting differences between the UK and America, which is why we'll never go quite like that. There's a rump of people now who, whether it is for things that you quote in your books or whatever it is people say, can never now admit that they were wrong. But those people will always be there. But the other people who may not be quite as influenced by what they've seen, they've smelt, they've touched at airports, getting their dogs through, whatever it is, e-gates. They're businesses now. People will be working. People who voted leave will be working for companies that have suffered in the last 8 years because of the nonsense of trading restrictions. Those people will now see when they go into work, they may get busier. They'll hear people saying, this is great now, we can now
not
trade.
necessarily. I mean, a lot of it's going to take quite a while to land. So then he's got another political problem, is in that it is all the things you describe are going to happen to varying degrees, but they might not happen quickly enough for his political fortunes or indeed for your theory to hold.
It's only got to land by July the 4th at the latest of 2029.
Yeah.
That's when it's got to land. So you've got, and this is why I think Sir Keir Starmer has done this very well, get all this done ASAP to give it as much time to land. And those people who are working, when you think about, the security of people's jobs will hopefully go up as and when they have more ability to trade. Interest rates, because the economy will hopefully get better because we can trade more, our GDP. There's going to come a point where the two opposition parties, who are going to be very pro-Brexit, they're actually going to have to tell people now, remember what we said would happen, didn't happen, and you had the effects of it. We're now going to ask you to go back to what you know doesn't happen, what you know doesn't work. We're going to ask you to go back and vote for something that made your business less secure, made your job less secure, made your family income less secure, made your interest rates less secure. Now, that's going to be a big ask for people. And I don't know if it's I don't know what, not analogy, what metaphor, whatever the expression uses. Do we use the Wizard of Oz when they pulled the curtain back? Do we use the Scooby-Doo amusement fair guy when you rip the mask off? But people have now seen it, James. People have seen on a very simplistic level how it didn't work out on any way what they were promised to do.
You're quite glass half full, aren't you?
I'm very positive. I knock on the door. I work, as an activist for the Labour Party. I knock on the door, and I come across people of two kinds. People who are quite sanguine about what's going on and keep their own opinions to themselves, and they're the people that I think will be the ones that need to see what changes will happen over the next 4 years. And I knock on the doors of people who, as soon as they can get the chance to get out the front door after I've finished or put a letter through or poster through, to come out with a great bravado of tearing it up in front of me and throwing it in the bin. Actually, they normally throw it in their own garden, so they're literally in their own garden. But they're the people that will never change, James, for many reasons. But I think the large percentage of population who did vote Reform because they believed Gove, they believed David Davis as maybe possibly more sensible figures than the Farage followers or the Priti Patel followers. Even those that thought, God, I never realised David Davis would be this wrong. I never realised Gove would be this wrong.
That's interesting. Well, that explains why the Tories have been decimated. I mean, they in some of the polling now are down into fourth place, but it doesn't really explain why Farage's outfit is still surging.
Well, is it surging, or is it just we go back to this stage where do we have people who are now almost had wedded themselves to Reform, had wedded themselves to Brexit, and in their own group now, whenever they're asked, they can't be seen to be going back? Do we have the negative of shy Trumpers?
I don't know. You mean in opinion polling, you're going to say that you support him because he's really the only one left who looks like he's still punting Brexit nonsense, and you're not yet ready to admit you've made a mistake. But high 20s now, that's a lot of people to do that. And but you're right in many ways, and I enjoy your analysis. In a way, if you're going to be out knocking doors for Labour, you kind of have to be coming at it from the perspective that you're coming at it from. But it's clear that you speak sincerely and authentically, and it's strangely refreshing because, of course, that's a voice, that's a position you'll hardly ever see reflected in most of the UK media. Some YouGov polling in while we've been on air, 66% of the population would support the UK having a closer relationship with the EU. But remember, that doesn't mean rejoin. For whatever reasons, it doesn't matter what the reasons are, it doesn't mean the same as wanting to rejoin. 52% of Leave voters and 54% of Reform UK voters would support the UK having a closer relationship with the EU. That's why Murray's quite right to remind us of the timescale, because so much can change, and there's a coalition there that seems pretty close to unsustainable. 11:32 is the time. Thomas Watts is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:36 is the time. A little more on that polling that has been published this morning. 6 in 10 believe Brexit has been more of a failure than a success. I don't know what the figure is for people who believe it's been more of a success than a failure, but again, that delusion is strong. What's the threshold, do you think, for Farage to keep a promise for the first time in his life and actually leave the country in the event of Brexit being a failure? 6 in 10 seems pretty high. It's a bigger proportion than the referendum was actually won by, 60% as opposed to 51.8 or 9. But of course, these questions are largely academic, aren't they, because of that historic inability to keep any promises at all. 53% now support rejoining the European Union. That's not enough to get excited about. Seriously, you see today's front pages, done up like a kipper, Starmer's surrender, kiss goodbye to Brexit. Imagine turning that up now for 2 months. And bringing back all the racism that the Daily Mail was absolutely dripping with for the 2 months leading up to the referendum actually happening. And you could easily undo that 53%. But closer ties and rejoin. And I know a lot of my closest compadres struggle to accept this. And I could be wrong. Of course, I could always be wrong. But the distinction between wanting to rejoin and wanting a closer relationship is the single most important element of the UK's relationship with the EU for at least the next generation. Sorry, but it's true, in my view. Going any further than that, unless big things change, I think that is just a given. But 66% support the UK having a closer relationship with the EU, and 53% support rejoining the European Union is quite a moment, quite a morning when you consider how all of those people are being served by His Majesty's media. Up to and including broadcasters that are supposed to be impartial but still chose to lead their lines of questioning yesterday with government ministers by talking about the perceived betrayal of the fishing industry. Honestly, and that woman's back in the news, June Mummery, do you remember her from Lowestoft? I mean, these people, if they honestly came out and said this deal is terrible because it's going to kill all the unicorns, do you think the BBC would go in on an interview with Keir Starmer on, well, a lot of people, half the country is going to claim you've killed all the unicorns? I don't know anymore. Half the country claims that the earth is flat. Half the country claims this, that or the other. I honestly don't know. So we're carrying on with this. I've got a caller from Sophia next. So I should stress that Sophia phobia, the condition described by our earlier caller, William, I think it was William. It did not mean the capital of Bulgaria, where my next caller is ringing from. But I just want to set something else up as well for the next sort of part of the programme. Have you, and I'm talking to you now personally, have you had time to digest this? So we've had a look at what Asda, Morrison's, M&S, Octopus Energy, Salmon Scotland, BAE Systems, Vodafone Dairy UK, the British Retail Consortium, Ryanair, Guide Dogs Campaigns, Federation of Small Businesses, Confederation of British Industry, UK Hospitality, the Food and Drink Federation, the British Poultry Council, Babcock International Group, British Meat Processors Association, British Chamber of Commerce, and many more. We've had a look at what they have to say, which is, we really welcome this, and it is very, very good for us. On the other side of the divide, you've got Kemi Badenoch, Nigel Farage, Richard Littlejohn and Andrew Neil. But what about you? What about a smaller business? Rather than listening to your spokesperson from the Federation of Small Businesses, have you been able to calculate or conclude and confirm yet what this means for you? My memory's pretty good, but it's not infallible. So I remember we spoke to some lovely people in the years immediately after Brexit. And shellfish, do you remember when it was explained to us that people were going to have to build their own tanks? Were they cleaning tanks or something for shellfish? Where previously you could take the shellfish to France and they'd put it in a tank and then sell it. So the deal was kind of clean and sell. But the SPS rules meant that you wouldn't be able to do that anymore. You wouldn't be able to take anything into France that hadn't already been, I keep saying cleaned. That may not be the right word. So this is great news for them. But whether they're still listening to the programme or not, I do not know. But you export or import. And although we haven't got the absolute final details of it, and crucially we haven't got the dates in place, when what has been announced occurs, how is it going to affect you? 0345 60600973. So there's an awful lot of talk about betrayal and surrender and the rest of it, but those are the desperate squeals of awful people. In the context of your life and crucially your livelihood, we're hearing from the big hitters. I'd quite like to hear from the middle hitters or the little hitters. And it involve a quick heads up on how badly you've been affected by the so-called oven-ready deal in the first place. But what I'm more interested in is the good news. The good news is, James, that I will now be able to I will now be able to reconnect with my European customers. I wonder about the cheese guy who, of course, did he sell his company or did he open up a hub in France so that he'd be able to, I mean, that now becomes expenditure that perhaps he wouldn't need to do today in order to keep his European customers happy. You understand? Filtered, flushed and purified, not cleaned, dressed perhaps, filtered. But anyway, you knew what I was talking about. 0345 60600973 is the number that you need. Are you already capable of describing how this is going to affect your business, your livelihood? As promised, off to Sofia in Bulgaria. Fez is there. Fez, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I just wanted to say thank you for having me on.
You're very welcome.
I've been a long-time listener, but I've never actually had anything to contribute before this.
That doesn't generally stop people, Fez. Seriously, I'm
sure. But obviously, so with the news of the EU trade deal, more about the youth movement scheme, a lot of us students that are studying in the EU, we kind of celebrated first, and then we thought, wait, what does this actually mean? After looking into it, again, from my understanding, it is generally a net positive, because there's so many things to do with our daily lives in, for example, for me in Sofia, there are other cities in Bulgaria that also have a lot of UK students, even places like, in Prague as well, Romania, all these different countries where students from the UK actually come to study. And it is mainly for medical degrees, so your main medicine and also dental medicine.
Really?
Yeah, so that's what I'm studying. I'm studying medicine. And there's a great number of physicians and doctors that come graduate from Eastern Europe, and they come back and work in the NHS. It's kind of a view that not many people actually know about, the amount of students that are actually coming back from Eastern Europe to work in the NHS. But I do think that other than, the simple things that would make our lives easier, for example, our visas and residence permits, I do think that it would do the UK more, especially the NHS, it would do a lot of good to them, mainly because with the recent trend of junior doctors and even more senior doctors leaving the NHS to move to other countries, we've been in quite a crisis in that sense. So having the ability for UK residents to study abroad and have an easier time converting their degrees back to the UK, it would definitely be a lifeline that I think the NHS really, really needs right now.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought of that. And again, we await the detail, don't we? But
of course, yeah.
The maddest thing, I think, about some of the hysterical reaction to what happened yesterday, which, didn't go that far in the great scheme of things, but certainly went far enough to merit the conversations that we've been having. The maddest thing was the way in which what was previously reserved for mythical Turks, the idea that millions of Turkish people were going to join the European Union and that they were all undesirable and that they would all move here overnight. Some people trying to turn the Bulgarian equivalent of you or the French equivalent of you, trying to turn them into the new demons. The idea that young people might want to come to this country to study and to work and to make that easier is somehow a bad thing to do. It must be quite, for someone of your generation, it must be quite hard to get your head around that, because it's the world in many ways that you've always known.
Yeah, I mean, I'll let you know, I don't want to tell you anything about my age exactly, but obviously me being a student, you'll be able to tell.
Exactly.
But initially, the Brexit referendum, or referendums, I should say, I wasn't even old enough to actually contribute in that anyway. But I've always been, like you. Yeah, I've always been politically involved in that sense, making sure that I always know the most that I possibly can. And now I think since I've moved to Sofia, I've kind of realised the way that the people of my country have forgotten about a certain number of us that do actually move to Europe. A lot of the process of actually getting here in the first place, forgetting about, getting into the uni, all of that admission.
Of course.
But the actual, the visa, the residence permit, it's a real process compared to some of my friends that are from the EU.
Can I ask you a question? You don't have to give me any detail if you don't want to. But I notice a lot of the people who are pretending to be cross about this or projecting their anger at themselves for being so stupid onto the people trying to fix some of the mistakes that they've made. They try to bring class into it, and they try to claim that wanting to study abroad is as if there's anything wrong with being middle class, but it works very well. It's only a middle class thing. Yeah, the children of working class parents don't want to study abroad. They don't want to travel. They don't want to spend summer in France. They don't. It's just metropolitan liberal elites. I am a member of the metropolitan liberal elite. I don't know whether you are, but I find that incredibly depressing, because it's as if people are being told that they should spend their entire lives living in whatever pigeonhole they were born in. How does it reach someone of your age? The idea that if you want to study abroad, then you've got to be some sort of privileged middle class person who doesn't know what real life is like back in Britain.
Well, I'm going to be entirely honest. So for a lot of, if there are students that go to maybe France or some of the other countries that are a bit more desirable, that would definitely be true. And even coming to Eastern Europe, it's not easy for people in working class to achieve. But
so we should be making it easier.
Exactly, and that's what I do think, that if they do these the youth movement scheme, if it is planned in the right way, I think that opportunities like studying abroad for things like medicine and even other degrees, I think it will become a lot more accessible. I mean, before Brexit, there was actually the ability for certain finance schemes for students that want to study in Europe. Now, obviously, it's not possible since Brexit.
It's a simple recognition of the size of the world that you could live in, isn't it, sometimes? And not all of it. That's why you have agreements. It's why you have treaties. But you'd paint it in a way that would make it, for people of your age listening who don't pay as much attention to your politics, to politics as you do, there'll be people listening to this who you would struggle to explain to them why people wanted to take it away in the first place. But here we are. It's 11:48.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:51 is the time. Listen, it's obviously not an echo chamber, this programme, because of all the people that ring in to argue with me. Not as many as they used to, but we can look at the texts as well for proof that there's lots and lots of people listening who aren't necessarily on the same page as many of us are. The latest telling me that reading out all of the comments from these supermarkets and the Confederation of Small Businesses and Salmon Scotland and the British Retail Consortium and Dairy UK is proof that I don't understand anything, because that's it, isn't it? It's all about big business with the EU. And nothing says big business like the Federation of Small Businesses. Honestly, Idiot's Corner's been a bit quiet this week because I've been a tiny bit distracted. But the thing about supermarkets, mate... Oh, actually, do you know what? Don't bother. If you can't work out why food being cheaper in your supermarkets is good for you, then I'm not capable of helping you. I'm really not. It is a task beyond my wit. I should probably dig the actual message out so that I can name you before popping you into the corner. But before that, back to the phones. Andrew is in Santander. Andrew, what made you pick up the phone?
Good morning, James.
Hello, mate.
Well, what a pleasure to be on.
Ditto.
Basically, because it just sort of fits us, fair and square. We've got a brewery here in the north of Spain. Should pop down one day. And our raw material comes from Norfolk. Basically, it comes we use malt from Norfolk, and we've been doing that for nearly 20 years now. So when this came along, which incidentally I wasn't allowed to vote on, being a non-resident,
right,
and having a French wife, not very European, and so then it all went down the pan. But we've stuck with it. So before I could call up Chris Maltings in Norfolk and say, look, we need malt, and I could get a shipment here in 6 days.
Yeah.
That 6 days turned into 6 weeks.
Good Lord, really?
And first of all, we had the problem with truck drivers didn't want to pick loads up.
Yeah.
And then all the paperwork. So we can still get stopped now. Shipments can still get held up for a week or 2 weeks while we have to provide written explanation of what malt is, what malt contains. Well, it contains malt. But that basically can go backwards and forwards for a week or 2 weeks, and so there's no just in time anymore. But plus expense, everything like.
Can you put a figure on it? Do you have a rough idea of?
Probably per load at the moment. We'd probably, if things go back to where they were.
Yeah.
I don't know, 600 euros. Easy.
Per load.
700 euros. Yeah, per load.
Good Lord.
Yeah. Plus all the time.
Good labour as well on top of that, of course.
Yeah. It's having people doing things that are just absolutely not necessary.
And you hung in there, so you're a really good example of what I was talking about earlier. The UK has suffered a 21% drop in exports, but of course the 79% that remains, every single one of them is going to have had their life made much harder.
We stuck with it like for quality reasons. I mean, we're the beer that we brew needs the ingredients that we use, and we drink it basically. So
so your profits have gone down, have they, or have you just managed to
everything takes, and then as far as us actually getting any beer into the UK, which we did do before. Before Brexit,
yes, of course, it cuts both ways, doesn't it?
That just becomes a non-starter. We sent at the beginning of this. We sent. I remember sending samples to the UK, and they came back after 6 weeks for a paperwork question. At the same time, we sent beer to Shanghai. It got there in 6 days.
That's insane, isn't it?
So it does make you wonder.
So, I mean, waiting for the detail, waiting for the dust to settle, for the ink to dry, but this is a good thing in both directions as well, of course, because the people that are exporting the malt to you from Norfolk will have their lives rendered measurably easier as well. And thank you, Andrew. You make a really interesting... Obviously, Andrew Neil, who spends much of his life living in France, thinks that you're wrong and that the rush to throw in our lot with the stagnant EU is unfathomable, but... we'll leave him to his contemplations. That idea about the exports, even when they're happening, they're still much, much harder than they were before. The thing I think I've been struck by most today was the realization that if you're in business, you don't want to spend an awful lot of your time complaining. You want to have representation. You want to have a lobby group going into business to help you. Farmers spend a lot of their time complaining with varying degrees of good cause, but we don't buy from farmers. Farmers only deal really with wholesalers rather, and retailers. If you are in the business of serving punters directly, then I wonder whether psychologically, the more complaining you do, the more your brand can suffer. Supermarkets announcing that they've got empty shelves are going to discourage customers from going to supermarkets. Supermarkets complaining that they're having to put their costs up all the time are going to discourage customers from going. It's not a conspiracy of silence because it makes perfect commercial and psychological sense. But if you are enduring costs and therefore passing some of them on to your customer, you're not going to shout it from the rooftops because that's the opposite of marketing. It's the opposite of good advertising. I don't know whether or not you're laughing at me for being so slow on the uptake, but that's never properly occurred to me before. I've sat here genuinely confused by why certain sectors who've been completely kebabbed by what Boris Johnson and David Frost did to them haven't been screaming, well, blue murder, frankly, from the rooftops. But it's actually quite obvious when you think about it, especially when you introduce that extra element that literally only occurred to me while I was talking to Andrew, in that the fish can complain endlessly as well because they're not selling direct to the punter often. I know sometimes you can buy it on the dockside and stuff like that, but if you are supplying to wholesale, then you don't need to worry too much about putting your customers off, because the wholesalers are going to need to take what you've got anyway. But if you are selling retail to a punter and you're saying, oh, I can't, this is so expensive, and we've got nothing to sell and the shelves are empty and the paperwork's awful, I'm going to think, well, that bloke over the road's not complaining. I'm going to go and buy my stuff from him. Speaking of which, something very exciting has happened in my part of town. I just mentioned this because the Morrisons chief executive was quoted in that last round of praise for Keir Starmer's deal. But remember, don't listen to the people who know what they're talking about. Listen to Andrew Neil and Richard Littlejohn because they really get it. We've got a Lidl opening near us. And I'm not an expert on these matters. Actually, who am I kidding? I am. Morrisons is now stepping up to the Lidl middle plate. So you can now buy stuff in Morrisons that you couldn't buy before. You're getting that little early because the Lidl's about to open in the summer. Morrisons is a short walk away. So they're now selling some of that really cool stuff that you didn't know you wanted until you bumped into it in the supermarket.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 3 minutes after 12 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So I thought I might have imagined it, but I didn't. It really did happen. The desperate attempts to kind of reignite these furious, ignorant flames of xenophobia and anger by coming up with new lies, new exaggerations, new embellishments about what Keir Starmer agreed yesterday. Couple more quotes for you. This is an exclusive, actually. I don't think they've said this to anyone else yet. This is from the chief executive of BAE Systems, one of our biggest arms manufacturers. This announcement is a positive step forwards for both UK and EU security. We already deliver a central role in European security through our combat vehicles and artillery businesses in Sweden, and our involvement with Eurofighter and MBDA, among other activities. Increased collaboration will ultimately benefit the UK's security and prosperity, and we are proud to support UK and European government customers. But don't forget, Andrew Neil says that the rush to throw in our lot with the stagnant EU is unfathomable. Over at the Institute of Directors, Emma Rowland, the trade policy advisor, has said that the reset of relations has been a long time coming. Our own research shows that an improved trade deal is seen as one of the top 3 factors that would help boost UK growth. Today's announcements will provide British businesses with relief that some barriers to trading with our closest and largest trading partner will come down. But don't forget, Richard Littlejohn says we've been done up like a kipper. Doesn't even begin to cover the PM's sellout. So That's the Institute of Directors. That's BAE. I've got more. UK Steel, anybody? Our friend who felt it was Ian here. No, it wasn't Ian. Someone saying that it's all about big business. You know, people work in the steel industry. UK Steel welcomes the formalised plan to link the UK and EU emissions trading schemes and new improved market access, a significant step in reducing trade frictions, yada, yada, yada. It's all positive. That's BAE, the Institute of Directors, UK Steel. Oh, look, here's the Port of Dover. The Port of Dover welcomes the UK-EU deal announced today, which represents a significant and positive step forward in resetting and strengthening our vital cross-channel economic relationship. But what the heck does the Port of Dover know about cross-channel economic relationships, eh? Nothing, am I right? Am I right? Let's see what the Daily Express has to say on its front page. Actually, let's not. They almost certainly quote Nigel Farage using words like betrayal. British Meat Processors Association strongly welcomes the work done by government to deliver the kind of seamless access to Britain's biggest, wealthiest and most strategically important export market. Or, as Andrew Neil would put it, the rush to throw in our lot with Britain's most strategic and important export market is unfathomable. So that's the British Meat Processors Association, the Port of Dover, BAE, Institute of Directors, UK Steel, Asda, Morrisons, Marks & Spencer, Salmon Scotland, British Retail Consortium, Dairy UK, Ryanair, the Federation of Small Businesses, and somewhat to my surprise, but they're here, so we should include them, the Guide Dogs campaign. Oh, of course, the pet passports. It's a big deal. The Guide Dogs campaign welcomes the agreement, enabling the UK to take part in the pest passport scheme, as some other European but non-EU member countries already do. This should make the process for people travelling with their guide dog more straightforward. And you don't need me to explain to you how important guide dogs can be to people, but don't listen to them, listen to Richard Littlejohn. Done up like a kipper, doesn't even begin to cover the PM sellout. Listen to the Daily Telegraph, say goodbye to Brexit. Listen to The Sun. Done up like a kipper. Oh, that's a shame. You'd have thought that there might be some more original thinking in those corners. And the Daily Express, which I shouldn't leave out. It wouldn't be fair. Keir's abject surrender is betrayal of Brexit Britain. And oh, look, Nigel Farage called the pact a betrayal on the front page. So what are they going to do to get these flames burning again, if indeed they're going to be capable of doing so? Well, here's an early indication from someone I don't know whether you've heard of. If you haven't, I can only apologise for bringing him to your attention. A Sun journalist by the name of Harry Cole, who definitely was not cuckolded by Boris Johnson. Here he is on the telly last night.
Statistics in 2016, when free movement ended, 2/3 of free movement was under 35s. So the potential is that there's up to 80 million people who will qualify for this now. What happens if how rigidly imposed is this quota going to be? Will they be able to bring their families with them? Will they be able to bring dependents? We're just not all of that good at monitoring this stuff. They'll say, "Oh, we're going to keep a beady eye on it. We're going to keep controls and caps and time limits." All of history shows us that those are taken advantage of, and actually, once you give an inch, people tend to come here for a lot longer than the 2-year sightseeing visit of Stonehenge.
My dear Keir.
You always know that the EU have won the day when they start to be really nice. They start to say, "Dear Keir," and they say, "Oh, of course, no, this is completely in line with your manifesto." And when they're helpful, when they're being helpful, you know they've won.
So politeness now is something that we should condemn and attack. Didn't she say "Dear Rishi" last time she was in town? I think she did. Anyway, Turkey, population 76 million, joining the EU. That was held up during the Brexit campaign. Boris Johnson denied, of course, that he had got involved in those lies. And now there's someone there from The Sun claiming 80 million people could be coming here yesterday. With their grannies as well. They'll be bringing their grannies. Listen, read the treaty. The arrangements will be concluded to the satisfaction of both parties. And that, I think, gives me some hope. If they're that desperate and that pathetic, then I wonder whether these lies will be as effective as the last lot of lies. Turkey is joining the EU. Spoiler alert, it hasn't, and it isn't anytime soon. Population 76 million. Brackets, Muslims, close brackets, open brackets, all moving here, close brackets. I'm beginning now to think the media is increasingly detached from the public on this. You've got the social media feeding the biggest bigots, red meat that the traditional media probably can't properly compete with. And the population, I suspect, ready for a much calmer conversation. We shall see. 10 minutes after 12 is the time. Karen is in Chippenham. Karen, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Good afternoon. Well, first of all, it's no wonder that the British and European aerospace industries are absolutely delighted, including BAE Systems, Babcock and so on, because their craft, their big aircraft, as we all know, they've got bits and pieces made all over Europe, some in Wales, some in the UK, some in England and the rest in Europe. So they're really pleased, and look how they were hit by Brexit. And then on the other end of the scale...
Yeah, but what do they know, though? Harry Cole was on the telly last night complaining about mythical students. So you've got to balance these things out, Karen.
Well, he's an expert, isn't he?
An absolute expert, yes.
Yeah, and also, look at these small and medium-sized businesses, hospitality industry, music and creative industries, and, you can go on and on and on. All of these have been hit so hard by Brexit, but we need all of these industries, the whole lot of them, for the growth that we need for our economy. So, the fact that we've turned that oil tanker around and we're going back in the right direction, that's brilliant. But the thing is, what the great gaping unhealed wound of Brexit and the disruptive 2016 European referendum has exposed, it's a crisis of leadership in British politics and government, and also that, quite honestly, we have no politicians with vision. And so added to that is the lack of the popular trust in politicians, and also a crisis in democracy.
You're getting a lot off your chest.
Yeah, well, it's all been building up.
Really? No, good
and you're
for
really
you.
stirring me up as well.
Well, I'm the same. I've been getting a lot off my chest for the last couple of days. How do we know for sure that we've got a lack of politicians with vision? Because if and this is a big if, and I've been obviously very disappointed by a couple of things they've done recently. Very disappointed, in fact. Once by rhetoric, and then when it comes to benefits cuts, by substance as well. But what if they have got a vision? It's just that we live in a country, as that last clip I played demonstrated, where the media is so completely bent that we're never going to get a clear picture of whether or not a politician who's not from the further fringes of the right wing has got a vision or not. We live in a country where almost every newspaper, including the one that character writes for, could present Liz Truss to us as the answer to all of our problems, and then 2 months later pretend that they'd never done so. So what if the Labour government are actually quite good, but we just can't see it for all the noise?
Well, actually, I do think many of the individuals do have a vision, but, our party political system is not allowing these people to actually come through. And then, of course, the leaders, or the leaders such as they are, really have to always be listening out for what, some of these newspapers are doing. And the newspapers, after all, aren't democratic. So, we really need to get our democracy sorted out.
Gosh, well, that's quite a to-do list for what did you do in the referendum, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I'm ashamed to say, please don't tell me off, and that's why I'm saying why leadership is so important and vision. I'm ashamed to say I didn't understand these issues, and in particular, on trade, and because we kept being bamboozled with all the bureaucracy, and okay, there was a lot of bureaucracy in Brussels and so on, but I couldn't understand the issues. I really couldn't, but we didn't have the leaders who really could explain, what all the true benefits and risks of, remaining or leaving. And also, of course, we had people like David Owen, who I always really respected.
Yes.
And he was very much on the Leave side of things.
Was he?
So, yes, he was.
Good Lord, I missed that. What about Michael Heseltine? Why couldn't you listen to him?
Well, I did, but, if we had real leadership and they could really explain it to the likes of me who didn't understand all these big issues, and I repeat, on the trade and on the economy and that side of things, if we had leaders that I could really believe in and had vision, then honestly, what I would have done, I'd have voted according to how that leader would have guided us, because I would have felt that I could trust them, but I couldn't trust any of them, and it just turned me off.
Yeah, well, Richard suggests that you should check Ed Davey out if you're looking for vision.
He's a good chap, especially on the social care. Yeah. But look what happened. He ignored Alan Bates, didn't he, on the Horizon IT system?
Well, I've spoken to him about that, and the idea that it would have reached his desk and then been screwed up and thrown away is a little bit unfair. But I think he'd be the first to admit that he could have done more. You're letting the perfect be the enemy of the good, perhaps. I mean, who would be the infallible politician to whom we could all turn in times of trouble?
How about Darren Jones for Prime Minister, or David Lammy?
Okay. Peter Kyle, I keep hearing Peter Kyle keeps getting a bit of a nod. Carol Vorderman, no less. St. Carol of Vorderman suggested Peter Kyle for that gig, which speaks to a certain disillusionment with Keir Starmer, despite the events of this week. We will see. It is 12:15. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm going to make an executive decision, but I'm going to make an editorial decision, which means you can help. I noticed, I know I've been a bit hard on the BBC today, but you'll notice I haven't mentioned any names because that wouldn't be fair. Because they are doing their best. They're not deliberately lying to you like some of Rupert Murdoch's foot soldiers. They interviewed that lady I mentioned earlier. Do you remember the one in Lowestoft who went to Brussels as one of Farage's MEPs? And they've interviewed her without making it clear, as far as I can tell, they've interviewed her without making it clear that she is now the fisheries spokesperson for Farage's latest outfit. So these people who have got everything wrong and who didn't understand what they were doing in the first place, coming back for more. And it's incredible to watch. It's like a wildlife documentary, isn't it? Where something terrible happens. They do something terrible, but it doesn't hurt them. So they just keep doing it again and again and again and again. But the BBC have interviewed her without making it clear, A, what her history was, and B, what her loyalties are now, what her political loyalties are now. They basically interviewed Reform UK's fisheries spokeswoman while describing her as a business spokesperson, which I'd have thought, certainly if I'd done anything like that the other way around, I'd have people jumping up and down in outrage and fury. But the editorial decision that I want you to make for me, and you can only enter this if you have a memory of what I'm about to describe, would you like to revisit the time she rang this programme? Yes or no? I think it's pertinent. It's pertinent for two reasons. Reason number one, it addresses the question of whether or not these tactics are going to work again, whether or not we will be fooled again. And reason number two, the shameless ease with which they will slide back into their old behaviours and their old practices without taking any responsibility whatsoever for what happened last time people listened to them. So you decide, do you want to hear June Mummery, for it is she, speaking to me on this programme a few years ago? Your decision entirely. 12:17.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:19. So the BBC managed to wheel this woman out, I think yesterday, without mentioning that she's a former Brexit Party MEP and currently apparently works as a spokesperson on fisheries for Reform UK. But the BBC interviewed her without mentioning any of that and just set her up as a business spokesperson. I think she runs a fish auctioneers in Lowestoft. And I'm going to play you this, partly because I don't think we've ever had a response like that to one of the questions I've asked on air. Apart from Joe. Joe said no, which is an agreeable rhyme. Everyone else said yes, or varying degrees of enthusiasm, but hell yes. Good Lord, Andy, your memory's better than mine. It was South Korea, wasn't it, that kicked in at the end of the interview? I hope that makes the cut. It's quite long, but listen to it again, because this is what we could be going back to. This is what they want to go back to. This is the kind of conversation that the Sun and the Telegraph, the Times these days, but the Express and the Mail and all of the characters that work for them, all of the Richard Littlejohns and Andrew Neils insisting that they know more than the Port of Dover, the Guide Dogs Campaign, the British Meat Processors Association, Dairy UK, the British Retail Consortium, Ryanair, the Federation of Small Businesses, Asda, Morrison's, M&S, Salmon Scotland, BAE Systems, the Institute of Directors, UK Steel. They know nothing. Listen to the clever boys on the Daily Mail, and they are desperate for us all, the entire country, for the national conversation, for the public discourse, to go back to this.
I thought our Prime Minister, our government, was going to take back, we were promised that they would take back full control of our waters and the resource. If they had done that, James, yes, we would be in a very different position.
But I explained to you in 2018 why that was impossible.
Oh, James, please let me just finish.
Well, right. OK, but so you're not making any sense, June.
Oh, no, because you won't let me get this across.
All right, so if only we just believed more.
Yeah, what do you want to talk about? The fact that what we should have been, if we had taken back control, what part of this conversation can I get over? If we'd have taken back full control of our resource and the fish, we would be in a completely different position.
And who would we be selling it to? The biggest problem we have in our country, James, is that we should be selling it to our in our supermarkets instead of all the farmed fish that they sell. Bass from Vietnam, prawns from dikes in Thailand. Yes.
That's something the government had 5 years to do.
And was Brexit ever going to make any of that better?
I mean, Norway sell their fish to 149 different countries. James, selling fish is not a problem.
Where will we sell ours then?
The problem is... Pardon?
Where will we sell ours?
We'll sell it to France. We'll sell it to Holland. They'll need it. They've got big...
You know what the problem
James,
is
let
there?
Me finish?
No, June.
Please,
no, I will let you
finish.
but you can't sell it if you're not allowed to catch it.
Well, we're talking about the deal. I'm going back to what should have happened, what we were promised. This is a big deal. At the moment, Boris has lied about wallpapers and different things, but he lied to us.
June, you made the promises to the British people.
No, I didn't make...
Yes, you did. You stood for office in Nigel's party.
What did we promise?
You promised that we'd take back control. People said that's impossible. You said no, it isn't, and here we are.
Well, it isn't. It was not impossible.
It was.
But our government are weak and spineless and did not take back full control. If we'd have taken back and had the fish, we'd have sold it to France and Holland.
Can't do that without a trade agreement.
So they've got huge factories, James, and employees to pay. Where would they have got the fish from? Us. It's standard business sense, James. Don't try and make it look... Don't try and twist it.
I'm not twisting anything. We can't sell fish that we're not allowed to catch.
We're not allowed to catch... Well, listen, what I'm trying to say is we're quite happy as a coastal... as an island of catching our own fish in our waters and selling it.
Yes,
we're happy in our waters.
But I explained to you 3 years ago that the massive majority of the fish that we sold, we were catching in other waters because we don't like to eat the oily fish.
The reason we weren't catching it in our waters is because we weren't allowed to catch our fish.
And now we're not even allowed to fish in the waters that we were allowed to fish in before, which is the whole point of today's story from Hull, isn't it, June? The UK fisheries are lobbying the government don't shout.
We wanted rid of that.
Please don't shout.
Of the Keller.
Please don't shout.
I've got an earset in.
The government are being lobbied.
The Keller is a flagship. It's a Dutch vessel. It's British registered and owned by the UK, James.
Yes,
please.
Which means that it is subject to UK rather than EU legislation. Let me just hear you making a little promise before the election. Let's just go back in time again, June, if you'll allow.
We are taking back full control of our waters and the resource. It's as simple as that.
See, that's a promise. Who broke it?
Our government broke it,
But
James.
you made it.
What do you mean I made a promise?
Well, I'll remind you again. Have another listen.
We are taking back full control of our waters and the resource. It's as simple as that.
We wanted to do. And
what do you say to people who voted for you? What do you say to people who voted for you? Are you going to say sorry?
Sorry, I didn't do the deal.
Hang on, this is the promise you made.
We are taking back full control of our waters and the resource. It's as simple as that.
Wasn't simple, was it?
Simple.
Didn't happen, did it?
Made it difficult. It's the most simplest thing that you could do. I sat in an office in Lowestoft with Boris, and he promised me we would take back full control of our waters. That is what he told me.
And I told you that was impossible in March of 2018. I told you that was impossible in March of 2018, and you got cross about the facts and figures, didn't you? So anyway, before you go, I don't want to keep you from your meeting. On a scale of 1 to 10, how well is Brexit going for the fishing industry?
Fishing industry, dreadful.
A scale of 1 to 10.
I don't know, really, James. I mean, I'm still working on it daily, but really,
no, I know. But at the moment, scale of 1 to 10.
8. Badly. Bad. It's bad for us at the moment.
With 10 as the worst it could possibly be, it's currently an 8. You know, I have to put £10 in a tin for charity every time I say I told you so in the context of Brexit, June.
Well, yeah, but that's not quite right, is it? You've twisted
Keith,
that.
Get the tin. June Mummery, I told you so.
Was it 10 quid, Keith? I thought it was just a quid.
Seems like that must have been a while ago. And of course, what was missing from that conversation was that Farage and the rest of them rolled over for Boris Johnson in 2019 so that he could get the oven-ready deal done. And here we are. The one thing that has changed when Keir Starmer's deal kicks in is that selling fish that is caught by a fleet in Lowestoft into the European Union will become immeasurably easier for the same reasons that Richard in Santander will be able to get his malt from Norfolk for his brewery in Spain much more easily and much more frictionlessly than previously. So even the people bleating about betrayal of the fishing industry are overlooking the fact that things have got better for them, to which the response will be, yes, but if we hadn't done a deal, we could have forced them to give us, and then you're back to that woman's arguments, which is why the BBC was no doubt accidentally remiss when it offered her up as a sort of good faith business spokesperson without revealing either her previous or present political loyalties or, and I hope this isn't too rude, but you heard the same interview that I heard, the fact that she somehow manages to speak without possessing a brain. Richard is in Richmond. Getting towards the end of this conversation, Richard, because the Prime Minister is due to make a statement in the House of Commons. What made you pick up the phone?
Well, a variety of things. The way the conversation has gone. I want to tell you about taking my dog to the vet this morning.
Yes, go on.
Because I took her along for her annual health check, and I just asked, if I want to take her to Europe, what do I need to do?
Yes.
And the vet just said, yesterday, do you know what we were doing? We were cheering and laughing when we heard the announcement because we're so pleased to be going back to pet passports. We don't have to fill out a 40-page document now, or won't when it's agreed, in order to get a pet into Europe. And I think that's just a really good example of getting rid of a bit of red tape, but also it's really important to think about the future, not think about the past. And I think the right thing that Starmer is doing is he's getting the agenda to be about what we want to do for the future rather than going back over the old ground of the past. And as we heard with June, that's a very sensitive place to go. And I think it's much better to move on to that future view. And then you can also link that in with the need to be able to reduce manufacturing trading barriers because of the need for us to cooperate much more effectively with Europe on manufacturing to help support the renewed and increased spending on defence to deal with the threat from Russia and so forth.
Which we are now able to bid for contracts therein, which of course wasn't the case before yesterday's deal was announced. There's two things, isn't there? I mean, what we've touched on today is how appallingly the deal has been misreported, but I was kind of expecting that. What I wasn't expecting, or what I had forgotten, was that it's unlikely that many people realise the full extent of the damage that's been done. For all the polling that speaks of great dissatisfaction, the real extent of it, like your vet has demonstrated, has reminded you this morning, like Richard in Santander has told us about just beer, like everybody has recognised in terms of red tape and difficulties. Supermarkets, the list of companies queuing up to praise the deal, couldn't all have spent the last 9 years condemning Brexit or the last 3 or 4 years condemning Boris Johnson's deal. That's also down to the media, isn't it? The fact that most people don't understand what's been done to them.
But also, if you want to sell something to people, you need to talk about the benefits. You don't talk about the problems, you talk about the benefits of the solution. And if we can move the agenda to talking about the benefits and making things better, then I think we'd have a much healthier debate.
Wasn't Rees-Mogg briefly Minister of Brexit Benefits, or am I misremembering that? This all feels a little bit like a fever dream. And then one of my colleagues tried to pin him down on what the benefits were, and he suggested that the signage in the Dartford Tunnel could now be changed, whereas previously it couldn't. And we looked into it, and it turned out that the signage in the Dartford Tunnel had absolutely nothing to do with European Union membership. Oh, Richard, thank you, and I hope the dog's all right. It's 12:30. Amelia Cox has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Contain your excitement. Not only is Keir Starmer due to address the House of Commons on the subject of the deal that was announced yesterday between the UK and the EU, but we expect Kemi Badenoch might respond as well. I like her because she never commits any gaffes. Did you see that she spoke? I think she was in Wales the other day speaking to the Senate, and she mentioned how delighted she was to see so many MSPs, which would have been quite a journey for them. But why wouldn't a bunch of members of the Scottish Parliament come to watch the leader of the Conservatives speak to the Welsh Senate? Keir Starmer has just walked into the House. Are we going to have to do one of those things? Are we? Shall I go full Dimbleby? Keir Starmer has just walked into the chamber, where we expect him to make a speech shortly on the subject of the trade deal. Well, it was rather more than a trade deal, the deal, which also encompasses defence and security and many other areas with the European Union yesterday. We will cross live to the House of Commons as soon as he gets to his feet. I'm told I'm told by the production crew that he is wearing a blue tie today, a tie of blue. And we will be crossing live to the House of Commons as soon as the Prime Minister gets to his feet to begin this address, which has not happened yet. Is that Esther McVey? Is she still in the House of Commons? Oh my days. What's she wearing? Sorry, that was not full Dimbleby, was it? That was not full Dimbleby. She's wearing a very lovely cloak, actually. I can't quite tell whether it's Hufflepuff or Slytherin, but you'd have to presume Slytherin, wouldn't you? I am James O'Brien. You are listening to LBC, where we await the Prime Minister's address on the subject of... It's not really blue, it's teal, that tie, I would say, Keith. You've given me duff information. Fake news. That's teal. Well, anyway... I'll speak to David in Ramsgate for a second, and then as soon as he starts talking, Keir Starmer will get up and deliver his speech, because that's how it works. David in Ramsgate, what would you like to say?
Hi, good morning, James.
Hello,
First of all, keep up all the good work.
I'll do my best
on this. So I just wanted to mention a little frustration with Brexit that I hope these new regulations are going to fix. So I run a private aviation kind of travel agency.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a piece of legislation that came in since Brexit called cabotage.
Yes.
Which is to do with the freedoms of the air. And it has literally cost my business and my clients thousands. Because obviously pre-Brexit we were able to bring in European aircraft that could do internal UK flights.
Yes.
And now you can only use UK, which is G-registered aircraft to do.
So it's transporting goods or people from A to B in one country, but the transport operator is from another country. That is cabotage.
Absolutely, yes.
Yes.
And what you found is a lot of the savvy operators have obviously registered their aircraft as European registered, because there's more revenue in doing a Paris to Mallorca than there is, say, a London to Manchester. And effectively all that's now done is just drive up the prices, where to do a London to Manchester is just an incredible amount of money, and probably more than a European flight.
So, I mean, and this is something most people listening won't have heard anything about.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, in fact, actually, pre-Brexit, I went to Canterbury to one of these Brexit workshop, kind of, we can answer your questions. And when I mentioned what was going to happen to the cabotage rules after Brexit, not one person was able to answer. And they never came back to me to answer the question either.
Have you got any inkling yet of whether or not the new arrangement is going to improve things for you?
I haven't. I mean, I think a lot of it with the e-gates and the use of that is along the same kind of lines.
Because I'd be cautiously optimistic if I were you, based entirely on what... and that's where we have to leave it, David, because as I predicted, Keir Starmer is on his feet.
James O'Brien on LBC.